Hi people, welcome to another episode of Queer Prism 256 podcast, a podcast that shares day-to-day life experiences of LBQ women in Uganda in partnership with Forever Media. And Forever Media is
a production house which basically focuses on creating audio visuals for various digital platforms, and it's also a filmmaking company.
Today we are going to talk about mental health, and as usual I'm your host CJ with my girl
LJ. Today we are going to be talking about mental health, and as we know, mental health is something that affects each and everyone. We see people battling with depression, people battling with all kinds of disorders, and this topic it's going to help people who don't have access to information, people who do not know what they are going through. So we've seen of recent a South African famous rapper dying of depression. Like on Twitter, last time we saw a student from Makerere University committing suicide because she had failed her exam. So please listen in and suggest, follow the discussion, and I hope you'll pick something and hope you'll be able to share it with each and everyone out there.
Today we have a guest in studio who is really passionate about mental health. Please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Kiri Goje. I'm a mental health enthusiast from Kenya. I'm very passionate about mental health, very passionate about making it available for everyone and ensuring that everyone has access to mental health tools, and I'm happy to be here.
So, Jay, please tell us about yourself. Who is Jay? What do you love doing? What are you passionate about? What are your hobbies? What's your favorite food?
Wow. I always say when someone asks me who I am that is a very complicated question, but not because I can't answer, but because I feel like it's a very, very long answer. But who is Jay? I would say Jay is a creative, a writer, a very passionate person about living life to the fullest and as authentic as you can live it. And I love a good book. I love being in the sun. I really, really, really love cats. It's a stereotype, but I accept it. Lesbians and cats, I accept it.
And dogs too.
And dogs too.
Okay, tell us about the organization you work with.
I work for an organization called International Mental Health Association. It is a global organization that focuses on providing global solutions to mental health. Its approach is mostly community-based, where it works with community-based organizations on ground to try and find solutions to mental health. For me, my passion about mental health is very much rooted to my experience with mental health, where for me, I find that it is a discussion that is not mostly had, and for me it's creating spaces where we can have discussions that I wish I had when I was younger. So that's where my passion stems out of, and yeah, that's in a nutshell who I am.
How about you tell us about the work that your organization does?
Our organization uses community-based approach to mental health, where it partners with organizations in ground to maybe come up with projects, campaigns that can help to create mental health awareness, which is what brought me to Uganda, where we were doing a fellowship with an organization in Barara called the Alive Again Foundation, where we did mental health literacy workshops and mental health training in different places. And that's mostly what we do in our organization.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does mental health mean to you as Jay, or as us who are here?
For me, mental health is the backbone of existence, in that it is a part of us, as everything is a part of us, in that mental health is not something separate from physical health. It's not something separate from any other form of health. It's just a part of us. Just like every single day you have to do things towards your physical health. You eat healthy, maybe you take a walk so that you can maintain your physical health. It's the same approach that I have for mental health. That's my view of mental health. And what does mental health mean? Mental health is the mental well-being, or the all-round well-being of our minds, because our mind and our brain are two different things.
Natalie, what is mental health? What does it mean to you?
Thank you, CJ, for that beautiful question. Personally, I think mental health is anything between finding a balance between your emotional well-being and physical, and everything roots from emotionally or psychologically, one of the two. Yeah, I'm thinking finding a balance between your mental well-being, which affects the physical existence, and yes, I think it's basically finding that balance where you have control of what goes on in your mind, which influences what comes out of you in various environments.
LJ, what does mental health mean to you?
Mental health, to me, I would understand it as how we cope with our day-to-day lives. What you go through, like today might be different what you're going through the next day. So to me, I would describe it as how I feel depending like on how I wake up. Basically like your day-to-day life, and also your mental health changes from time to time and from months to months. That's how I would understand it.
Mm-hmm. So Jay, as someone who is really passionate about mental health, what mental illnesses are common in the community you serve?
I will speak as a mental health enthusiast more than a clinician, because it's important to note that only a clinician can diagnose a mental illness, and because there's a whole diagnostic statistic manual that is dedicated to diagnosing all mental illnesses. But from an overview point, I would say that the mental illnesses that are mostly common are depression, anxiety. Mostly depression and anxiety are mostly the highest ones. We have seen a bit of bipolar, but that is the people that have been diagnosed and have come out and said, this is what I am dealing with. But you cannot diagnose someone from looking at them. You cannot diagnose someone from how they speak or how they behave. So this is just speaking from a very allegedly point. Yeah.
Okay. People keep throwing the word depression around, even when they're just maybe when they've had a fight with their partner. Someone will tell you, I'm really depressed. My relationship is going apart, or it's falling into pieces, or it's falling apart. What does depression really mean to you?
Depression in very simple terms is like a chronic level of stress. It's where stress builds up to the point where it overwhelms the person, where they can't be able to do what they would normally do in a day-to-day basis. You can work through stress in a day-to-day basis. Sometimes you could be stressed, but you will still move around. But when that stress gets to a place where it is overwhelming and maybe it gets in the way of you doing what you're supposed to do every day, that is when it is diagnosed maybe as depression. But we also have to realize that people throw around so many words nowadays that they don't really know the scientific meaning of them, but it's what do we call it, the urban language. It's just using words that are just good words.
I think depression, I will agree with what Jay mentions. When you can't come around to do what you're supposed to do, I think you find people get less motivated, or they don't have any motivation to do anything at all. And I think different people deal with this depression thing in different ways. Some people withdraw. We know people who cope through eating. I don't know what that is even called.
It's binge eating.
Binge.
Because it's an eating disorder. Because there's anorexia and there's bulimia and there's
Okay,
binge eating, I don't know whether it's among them, but binge eating is a thing.
Okay, I think I've been a victim of that. I'm one of those people who throw around nice words like depression, and I think how I go through it is really I get to eat. I crave for dairy products. I crave cheese or chocolate. I feel like it calms my nerves in a way. I don't know if it is a mind thing, yes, but I think I've been a victim of that though. I also believe in mostly how I would understand when I'm depressed is I'm not motivated to do anything. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to talk to people. I withdraw completely. I don't do my work, so I function less. And I think I would really agree with that withdrawing from all your day-to-day physical activity. Yeah, that's me.
Jay, how about you help us understand bipolar disorder, eating disorder, and then is it bipolar disorder or it's just bipolar?
It's bipolar disorder. It could be. It's like how you can say depression illness or an illness called depression. It's just.
Yeah. So how about you help us understand bipolar disorder, eating disorder? Then there is also
OCD.
OCD, yeah, OCD, yes.
Traumatic stress disorder.
PTSD.
So, for fear of starting a class of mental illnesses, I will try and explain how disorders happen. So what happens is our bodies build coping mechanisms to different stressors that are around us. Say for instance, bipolar, you find that someone has extreme moods where they are either manic, very happy, or depressive, like very low. So you find that maybe this person was raised in a family where they were not taught how to regulate their emotions. So it's either they are one extreme or they are another extreme. And mostly it's related with the balancing of the chemicals in the brain, but is also related to our body, mind, and soul connection. So the same thing applies to PTSD. PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. This occurs when you have gone through something traumatic, and then when you come back to adjusting to life, you start to find that you have flashbacks, you have panic attacks, you have, say, like your mind starts to struggle between what is real and what isn't, what you're remembering and what is actually happening in the moment. And that's why you find someone has panic attacks when they have those flashbacks, because your brain doesn't know the difference between what you're thinking and what is actually happening. That's why, have you ever noticed when you remember something happy, you become happy because your brain doesn't know the difference between what is being remembered and what is happening. So when you play a memory, your brain thinks it's happening right then, and that is what happens with PTSD. There was OCD. OCD is obsessive compulsive disorder. It's where someone obsessively and compulsively does one habit or one thing that maybe makes them feel safe. As I said before, that all these disorders stem from coping mechanisms. We have different coping mechanisms for different stressors. Like Natalie mentioned, she finds that when she's depressed, she eats. That's a coping mechanism. But when the eating becomes uncontrolled, when it becomes something that you can't control and it is messing with your daily life, that's when it becomes a disorder. The same thing with all these disorders is when a coping mechanisms gets to a point where it interferes with your day-to-day, which also leads to things like addiction, all those things. Yeah, that's like an overview of everything. Yeah.
How about you tell us about the intersectionality between mental health and queer people?
So mental health in itself is a social justice issue, and queerness in itself is a social justice issue. You find that when someone is struggling with their sexuality, when someone is struggling with their identity, there's this sense of like trying to understand the reality that you see, that you feel, and the reality that is in your mind, because you know who you are. But we are raised in places where we do not see ourselves in so many places. So there's this struggle with self-esteem, this struggle with self-worth, And what happens is that is the mind. So what happens is that affects the brain, and that is what leads to mental health illnesses, where you find that, say, someone completely feels paralyzed by the fact that they are not accepted, that they feel social anxiety that makes them not leave the house completely. Maybe you've seen someone who does not like leaving the house, not because of anything, but because they can't deal with people outside. They feel anxious every time they are around people, and mostly that this could be contributed to how they struggle with their identity or sexuality. Because you will find that even when I was just coming here, you'll find someone like, say, throwing words just because of how I look, and they don't feel like I should look how I look, and I should look a certain way. And so when you are going through the world, going through all that, that could contribute to your mental health. So the intersectionality comes in, where we look at ways in which dealing with our queerness can contribute to our mental well-being.
Just to supplement what Jay has said, we live in a society where there is religion, there is culture, there are all these so many things that really hinder like a queer person to be accepted, or for them to accept themselves. Because first of all, being queer is not something you can actively say, or something the society is willing to accept. So if you're being queer and then you're not being accepted, you're facing all these things. You do not know where to turn to. You do not know like to a person like to talk to, or these services if they're available for you to access. Obviously you're going to get mental problems, and you're going to get mental health issues, and you cannot go to your parents because your parents are not acceptive. Like you're not sure if they're going to accept you for who you are. And then when you turn to religion, you question yourself. You're like, it's my religion says this, but then again I'm like this. So there are so many things that you're taking in at the moment, and you do not know how to deal with all these things. So it all goes back, and you end up being depressed and facing all these things on your own. So and also patriarchy. Patriarchy is also like something that contributes to like mental problems when it comes to like queer people, because you can't express yourself. Just like Jia said, this is who I am and this is how I'm supposed to dress. Like that, there's nothing like gender roles. Boys are supposed to dress like this, girls are supposed to dress like this. So it all goes back to society. Yeah.
And if I can add, that guilt that you feel, say for instance when you have been told you're an abomination your whole life, that guilt that you feel every time when your queerness meets with religion and you feel guilt and shame, that is what also contributes to your mental well-being. Because mental well-being is not just mental illnesses. You find that we all deal with the symptoms of these mental illnesses somewhere in our day-to-day. That's why if you key in all the things you're going through, maybe you Google, you'll find that they will maybe diagnose you with a mental illness, because most human beings struggle with all these symptoms that you will see with mental illnesses. So this is how, like, for instance, the guilt and shame can contribute to your mental well-being. Because when you're feeling guilty and shame about who you are, it means every time you look at the mirror, you feel it. Every time you feel attracted to someone, you feel it. Every time you say it out loud to someone, you feel it. So that completely paralyzes who you are.
Yeah, I agree with everything we are talking about, and personally, if we draw it from society, I'll take it back to the family unit, because it's the smallest unit of organization in society. So I will take it back to family. We come from very toxic homes, you know. They try to suppress who you are while you're young. They have to shape you into who they feel you should be. So many times we find ourselves, our esteem is killed straight from home, or the places we grow up, whereby you see every time you try to be this, they're trying to remind you, you're not that, you're not that, you're overacting like a girl, you're a boy, men act like this, you're supposed to man up, and a man is expected to be this or that. And then some spaces, maybe some people grow up with one parent, and our parents really, they want to create mini thems. They want to recreate themselves in us. Yeah. So they find themselves trying to completely erase who you are. So when you grow up in a way where you have to cover or hide who you really are, because I know I'm a person who has been in the church, but even when I was in school, I went to a school because I loved music. So I would love to express myself, but in school, you don't have a lot of musical talent stuff going on, but the church is there. So you find yourself in the church, and then when you're in the church, you're expected to be perfect. There would be these dances at school, and because tomorrow I'm going to be worshiping on the altar, I want to dance, but I can't dance. I can't dance. And then I cover up who I am for the longest time of my life. And then I got comfortable with that. Now the times I come out and I'm like, okay, I've grown up. This is who I am. I am ashamed because, first of all, I'm not very familiar with who I am because I've been boxing who I am all this time. So who I am is new to me as an individual. So we find people on the streets and they're moving, talking to themselves. And some people smile even when they're sad. Whereas some people, you find one small thing and they'll blow up, You find someone struggling with everything within themselves, and that, I think, destabilizes your mental wellness. If you're lucky, you have people who understand you, well and good, but many times people don't have time to understand you. So if you're in a space and every time you find yourself in two extremes, you're either so cold or so hot, people distance themselves from you, but they don't have the time to know where is this rooting from, because we are all struggling with something. And I think this really brings about that mental breakdowns within the queers, within the queers or within the community. You find other people are also using hormones, or they're trying to assert themselves within the spaces they get to. They want to be seen. There's people who have pronouns they're comfortable with, and every time your people don't acknowledge it, they keep reminding you, and then you find yourself so bitter within yourself, but all this you keep on lashing out on other people. So I believe the family would be one of the common where it roots from. That's where it really emanates from. Yeah.
We also have to understand that the family, like your relationship with your mother, your relationship with your father, that was the first relationship you ever had in life. And as a child, what happens is your brain is always absorbing this behavior, absorbing all of these things. And you find our African parents, they usually say very mean things to us when we are growing up. They usually say them in a form of discipline, but they are very, very mean things. And you will observe as an adult, when you have done something wrong, those are the same things you tell yourself. If you've really sat down with your self-talk, especially when you've done something wrong, say maybe you did something wrong on a proposal, the way you beat yourself up, you will find you tell yourself the same exact thing your mother or father or the person that raised you was telling you, because this is what happens to our mind. It absorbs this and it creates that character and feels like this is how we should be. How our parents molded us to be is to be this. So we grow up molding ourselves to what we were expected to be, whilst also hiding ourselves, because we also live in an African setting where we are not allowed to voice our opinions. We are not allowed to challenge anything our parents tell us. So it's hard now to start dealing with the fact that you have a whole different sexuality that is different from your parents, different from your relatives, different from your neighbors, different from most of the people that are around you. So you can imagine dealing with this heavy thing on top of living in a society where you cannot talk to anyone. This is where queerness and mental health just they clash. Yeah.
How does someone's gender identity and sexual orientation affect their mental health? And have you fought your sexuality at some point in life?
when someone is struggling with their identity, with their sexuality, then they're struggling to accept themselves, which then leads to them struggling with their mental well-being, because then the reality that they know they should be living in their minds is not the thing that is happening in reality right now. So that whole battle is what leads to most of the mental health illnesses. In terms of struggling with my sexuality, well, I have really struggled with my sexuality. Growing up, my mom wasn't really religious. She was more liberal, but not liberal like you can do anything. But like in our African homes, even if they don't go to church every day, religion is unspoken. Like, even if your parents don't go to church, there's an aspect of you have to know God, you have to pray, there's always that aspect hanging around you. And then growing up and not seeing anyone who was like me, I was very extremely confused. I thought I really liked and admired my English teacher, but it turns out I had a crush on my English teacher. But at that time, I didn't have the words for that. I did not understand what that was. That's how, like, you don't even know what is happening. So even in going into high school, you have crushes on all these people and you don't know what is happening. You think you want them to be your best friend, you want them to be your friend, and then they become your friend, and then you realize you want more, but then you don't understand how to voice that. Because then you were there busy, maybe they're, like, for instance, I don't understand why people used to like to give me their letters to read and give them opinions about what the letters mean. So there will be these letters that people have been sent by boys, and then someone is telling me, can you read this and give me your opinion? So I'm like, I don't understand why you feel like I should give your opinion. But you see, when you're reading those letters, maybe you want to be the one writing those things, but you know it's at the back of your mind, you haven't seen it anywhere, and where you've seen it, people are being expelled or people are being prayed for very violently in the church. So now you're like,
keyword violent.
Violently, because those exorcisms are not nice. Have you seen how they usually throw someone's head? They're not nice. So you can imagine now, here you are finding out that you actually have these feelings, and then the model you have for that is either being expelled or being prayed for or being completely disowned by your parents. I mean, how are we not all like struggling very much? I don't even understand how we are all still standing, honestly, because these are the things that we've had to deal with. And then on top of that, then you come out, you realize, okay, so this is what I am. Then you come into this community and you realize, it's not one thing, there are other things. There are other things. Oh, so I have to choose a label. Oh, so I have to, if I choose this label, then I have to be very good at this.
Yeah.
Oh, if I dress like this, then someone expects me to be like a man, or I should not be cooking, or I shouldn't like to do certain things. And then now it's a whole other confusion, and then you realize that your identity is different. Because for me, like, I remember when I was younger, before the boobs, people thought I was a boy. Like, there was even a friend of my mom who actually thought I was a boy until they had me being called by my name. They were like, so this has been a girl the whole time. So when the boobs came out and I was told, you shouldn't play with boys now, you shouldn't do this, and I really liked to climb trees with boys, so I couldn't understand what is this thing that is making me different, and I was just the same person the other day. So for me, my battle with identity has greatly been in mostly body dysmorphia, but also as I'm growing up to myself, I'm realizing that gender doesn't have to be defined by this vessel that we carry around with. Like, just because I am like this doesn't mean I belong to the female or male, and just because I identify as non-binary doesn't mean I also have to be masculine expressing, that I can be whatever I want. And for me, my identity came from, even in my thoughts, whenever I refer to myself as a she, like, my mind corrects me, even in my thoughts. So that's how I know that this is how I would wish to be referred to as. And every time someone refers to me as she, like, I feel so separated from that pronoun, not because I'm not connected to my womanhood, but because I know I'm so much more.
Yeah, personally, I would also agree about the struggle. The struggle has been real. First of all, when you talk about religion, then you talk about family, then you talk about society, like all these spaces require you to be fitting in. So you find that you're a social misfit almost everywhere, unless you're within the community. But even in the community, as Jay mentioned, still you find the labels whereby you're not lesbian enough if you are bi, yeah. Or if you have a child, how did you have a child? And then there's those questions. So who is the top? Who is the man in the relationship, So there's all those things. I've struggled with all that, and I didn't know exactly what was happening. But we find that even the people we are supposed to talk to, they also have their beliefs that they're going to impose on us, or they will never understand. And when we talk about therapy, you find that most therapists I know are Christians, are people who are full of Holy Spirit, very radical. So you go and you're talking to someone about whatever it is you're struggling with, and that's where they have you in their hands, and they're like, so what is the problem at my girlfriend, this so do you know that it's a sin what you're doing? Don't you think? Let us first pray for you, like everything just turns back on you. And also one thing, I know people who are very homophobic, but what they assume that people who fall anywhere in the spectrum, they feel like maybe they're aliens who fall from Earth. When they're hating or preaching all that hate towards these people, they forget that these are our children, these are our uncles, aunties, our parents, these are our people. They don't have anything different from us, So when people are spreading out all this hate and all that negativity, people assume that maybe some different kind of spirit visited you and left us. So people do not look at it as, this is my child. But I also realize that when you get to know people before you put your labels on them, and you get to appreciate the difference, because we are 4 people here, but every one of us is very different. And when we acknowledge and appreciate the difference in all of us, it gets easier. If I found LJ is a certain kind of person, and say I was caught up in a certain situation, and they are going to come through for me, I will appreciate that this person is humane enough to come through for another human being. But people don't have time to get to know who you really are. They only see the label first, and then when they have labeled you, they don't have time to get to know the good things you have, whatever it is you add to society as an individual. So all these things, those are things that bring about the struggle within ourselves, within our people, where our parents, we introduce our people as best friend. This is my best friend, and you have to be best friend. And then until your parents are asking your best friend, when are you bringing your partner? I want to host you here in my home. Bring your boyfriend. I'll have a nice lunch or dinner for you. And then you find yourself hiring or getting a friend to pose as someone. Yeah. So all of these things bring about all this confusion and the struggle, and that is what makes it real. Yeah, that's what I really feel and I've experienced, and I believe.
And you also find that like mostly in schools, like in our homes, when you're born female, you're expected to be the one that cleans the house, that does all these chores. Then you go to school, you're expected that girls are not good at this subject, girls are not supposed to do this. Then you go to the church, you're told girls are supposed to be submissive. Like everywhere we go, we are being fed with all these things, everywhere. And then deep within, we know we are different, we know this is not what we are. So for us to come to that place where we are able to really accept who we are, it's actually a real struggle. I just want to say this to someone out there: if you are still struggling, it's okay, it's valid. If you have not gotten to a place where you've even accepted yourself, it's okay. Take all the time you need and be gentle with yourself, be kind with yourself. We are trying to beat years of programming, we are trying to beat years of being told this is wrong, this is right. We are beating years and years of being told we should be this, we should be that. So be kind with yourself. It's okay to still be confused. It's okay to still be going through the motions. It's very much okay.